I'm Steven Rennell, the host of the Meat Eater podcast and the Netflix original series Meat Eater. As a hunter and wildlife enthusiast, the question comes up, how can you justify killing and eating animals that you love and protect? Well, that's part of what we wrangle with on the Meat Eater podcast, along with broader and often funnier discussions about living an outdoor life in the modern world. Listen to the Meat Eater podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the podcast author or individuals participating in the podcast and do not necessarily represent those of iHeartMedia, Stuff Media, or its employees.
Some Zodiac researchers don't like people saying that they're obsessed with the case. I don't either, but for a different reason, because I blew past obsession about 5 years ago. It's far more than an obsession to me. My name is Mark Hewitt. I'm a true crime author. I've been researching the Zodiac case for about 11 years now. Various times I've looked at online websites and talked with other people about the case. Back in 2007, around the time that David Fincher's movie Zodiac came out, that was the beginning of my fascination with the case that became an obsession eventually. There were a couple times in my life back between 2003 and 2007 when I looked into the case. I spent a little bit of time on the 340 cipher and I thought about visiting different crime scenes. And it came a point where I said, you know what, either I'm going to have to throw myself into it wholeheartedly or I'm going to need to back away from it. It's got to be one of the two. I can't just dabble in it and feel like I'm doing anything seriously. So around about sometime in 2007, I made the decision that I was going to throw myself in it wholeheartedly and read everything I could read and talk to everybody I could talk to and figure out everything I could about the case. I threw myself into the case knowing that it was a high-profile case. It was 11 years of my life. A couple of years ago, my wife left me. I'm now divorced. In part because of the case. Not fully, not 100%, but I threw myself into the case and neglected friendships, neglected my family, neglected my career. It's something that I had to do because of my makeup as a person. This case has actually been my life for 11 years, and I'm going through the process now that the book has come out in September of what am I going to do now with my life? I can't live off the Zodiac forever. In fact, I've even thought to myself at times, well, you know, maybe I just need to walk away from it and just form new social communities, social circles, and just leave it completely. And yet I can't do that because I have great friendships here, and the case is still being looked at by the police, and people are still reading my book, and reporters keep calling me and asking for comments, asking for quotes. So I suspect I'll be involved with the Zodiac the rest of my life.
A man in a mask robbed, tied, and stabbed them, leaving them for dead.
Subject stated, I want to report a murder. No, a double murder. I did it.
A man who wore a medieval-style executioner's hood, carried a knife and gun, and intended to use them.
They haven't arrested me because they can't prove a thing. I'm not the damn Zodiac.
Who is the Zodiac, and where is he?
From iHeartRadio, How Stuff Works, and Tenderfoot TV, this is Monster, the Zodiac Killer. From the very beginning of this podcast, we've been asking the big question, who is the Zodiac? The theories seem endless. A few searches on the internet, and you can be lost in a sea of conjecture. No other murder in history has drawn so many names and speculation as to the killer's true identity. With all this information out there, how can we possibly find the true story? How long have we looked in the wrong places? Is it possible that there's more than one man behind the mask? The case details are so vague, so disconnected, they easily lend themselves to wild interpretation. And the unfortunate truth is, this might be part of the reason why the Zodiac has gotten away with these atrocities for over 50 years.
So there are a lot of myths out there about the Zodiac, and they often are attached to various theories about the case. So if someone has a suspect, they sort of tailor the story of the Zodiac to fit that suspect. So depending on who you're talking about, the story will change.
This is Zodiac expert Michael Butterfield. He says he's heard a lot of unlikely theories about the Zodiac. While many are based in truth, others are pure conjecture. Butterfield now listens to every news story with a skeptical ear.
So he's either a brilliant Harvard lecturer, or he's part of the Manson family, or all these things. And so each portrait of the Zodiac changes with each theory, but none of them correspond with reality.
The list of possible suspects is long and bizarre. There are dozens of names, including the improbable, Charles Manson, Dennis Rader, and even Texas U.S. Senator Ted Cruz. But there are also a number of more plausible suspects, and many investigators have explored these extensively, often spending years finding the clues and connections. And for these investigators, their suspect is everything.
This is what they believe, it's their truth, and I'm reporting what they believe. If there's another side to it, I report that too. I'm Rachel Raskins-Rehan, and I'm a journalist with the Times-Herald, Vallejo. When I got with the Times-Herald, it just came with the package, because the Times-Herald was involved from the start. I think the first time I got a phone call from someone who knew who the Zodiac was, I talked to someone about it. They said, oh, yeah, we get those all the time. You get letters, you get phone calls. They know for sure, and they want to tell you. And most of the time, there's nothing really you can do to disprove it. It happened a long time ago, and it happened to them. They developed their theory in their head. There's no way really to disprove it. So I don't normally try, unless something comes up in the story that presents itself an opportunity to talk to somebody else to see if there's another story out there that would contradict it or confirm it. Then I do that. Well, clearly some have gotten so into it that it's cost them other important elements in their life. I've, known of people who have lost marriages and families over it because they can't let it go.
One of these people is Mark Hewitt, who you heard at the beginning of the episode. After more than a decade of research, Mark recently published a trilogy of books on his Zodiac suspect.
I had to look at myself in the mirror a number of times over this past year and do a very serious gut check because I was going to go live and I was going to publish a book that identified Ted Kaczynski as the Zodiac serial killer. I put my credibility on the line, my researchability on the line. A lot of people have criticized it and ripped it apart online and called me an idiot and a fool. And one person said that they wouldn't have been more surprised if I'd named the Easter Bunny as being responsible for the Zodiac murders.
We met up with Mark at the Lake Herman Road 50th anniversary gathering, and it quickly became clear to me Mark had been through a lot. Regardless of the criticism he's received, Mark has done his homework, so we're going to hear Mark out and dig into his theory.
What I came up with was 6 or 7 clusters of evidence. One, for instance, is the whole use of mathematics. As you get to know the Zodiac letters, you realize there are an awful lot of numbers in his writings. There are equations. There are umpteen symbols.
This is important because Ted Kaczynski studied mathematics religiously, and according to Mark, there's one particular symbol that has special meaning to Kaczynski, a circle with a cross through it.
The crosshair symbol is a mathematical picture, an illustration of the equation x squared plus y squared equals 1, which is so basic to mathematics that it has its own term. It's called a unit circle. Ted Kaczynski, in a number of his papers, uses the phrase a unit circle, and a unit circle is used widely in his area of expertise, boundary functions, within mathematics.
For another clue, Mark says you can look to author Joseph Conrad's book, The Secret Agent.
If you read The Secret Agent, you realize, oh my goodness, there are an awful lot of numbers, there are an awful lot of phrases, there are a large number of vocabulary words that come straight from The Secret Agent into the Zodiac letters.
One example of this comes from the Zodiac letter received on November 11th, 1969. This was Zodiac's threat to bomb a school bus.
It won't do to reroute and reschedule the buses, because the bomb can be adapted to new conditions.
In Conrad's The Secret Agent, the main character says that he wants to, quote, invent a detonator that would adjust itself to all conditions of action, and even to unexpected changes of condition.
And why that's significant is because that is one of Ted Kaczynski's favorite books. He claims to have read it a dozen times. And one time when he was trying to explain himself to his parents and his brother, he said, you have to read this book to understand me.
Another tie between Zodiac and Kaczynski is the use of written declarations sent to the media. Mark says there are a lot of similarities between the Unabomber Manifesto and the Zodiac letters.
A lot of the wording and a lot of the explanation of the Unabomber Manifesto is merely justification. So Ted Kaczynski killed because he enjoyed killing. The Zodiac, in his 408 cipher, said, I like killing people because it's so much fun.
So both Kaczynski and the Zodiac killed for the pleasure of it, and both of them bragged about it in letters sent to local newspapers. Like many theories about Zodiac suspects, a lot of the evidence here is circumstantial. However, there are things that do eerily add up, like the timelines between Zodiac and Ted Kaczynski.
Ted was in California in 1966 interviewing for positions to become a math professor. In 1967, he moved to the Bay Area and was a professor at Berkeley from 67 to 69. 69, he abruptly resigned his position. 4 days later, 4 days after his last day of work, was the Blue Rock Springs murder. Over the next 2 years of his life, Ted Kaczynski was missing in action, and during those 2 years, the bulk of the Zodiac murders and the bulk of the Zodiac letters took place, culminating with the letter to the LA Times in March of 1971. The last time the Zodiac used the word Zodiac, the last time he used his crosshair symbol. Why is that significant? Because several months later, in June of 1971, Ted Kaczynski moved to Montana, built his cabin, and lived in Montana.
Between 1971 and 1974, new Zodiac letters were sent to the San Francisco Chronicle. However, these letters were different. They were signed with other aliases, such as the Red Phantom, or simply as a friend.
There are maybe a couple additional Zodiac letters after Ted moved to Montana, but they never used the word Zodiac and they never used the crosshair symbol. So the timelines of the Zodiac and Ted Kaczynski line up very well.
But what about the way Zodiac killed people versus the Unabomber? Zodiac only ever used guns and knives to kill. Is it possible he did follow through on his threat to make bombs?
The truth is, the Zodiac killed up until the murder of Paul Stein, in which he was cited, and that changed the Zodiac. As far as we know, he didn't attack after that. However, at that time, the Zodiac became more of a letter writer and began to write many, many letters to the police. And in those letters, he included a bomb diagram where he threatened to kill a school bus with a bomb. So the Zodiac himself morphed from a up-close and personal killer to somebody who threatened with bombs.
This isn't just some far-fetched theory. In 1996, San Francisco detectives announced they were investigating Ted Kaczynski as a possible Zodiac suspect. According to the San Francisco Chronicle, local investigators found distinct similarities between the Unabomber and Zodiac crimes. Among them were details Mark Hewitt had also found. Both sent letters to newspapers bragging of their crimes. Ted Kaczynski was in the Bay Area at the same time as the Zodiac murders, and Kaczynski often used a symbol similar to the Zodiac crosshairs symbol. Ultimately, police never confirmed any viable connections between Kaczynski and the Zodiac crimes. However, his name still exists on the roster of possible suspects, and for Mark Hewitt, that possibility keeps his research alive.
People have said to me, where are you going to go with this? Are you going to try to talk the police into it? Are you going to try to convince everybody? I don't feel that's my job. I'm a researcher. I'm a writer. I've researched the case. I've written about it. People can respond to it any way they want to.
I'm Steven Rennell, the host of the Meat Eater podcast and the Netflix original series Meat Eater. As a hunter and wildlife enthusiast, the question comes up, how can you justify killing and eating animals that you love and protect? Well, that's part of what we wrangle with on the Meat Eater podcast, along with broader and often funnier discussions about living an outdoor life in the modern world. Listen to the Meat Eater podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
There's so much detail to the Kaczynski case that covering everything in this episode would be impossible, and that's true for nearly all of the high-profile Zodiac suspects. In fact, the sheer amount of information and circumstantial evidence on these suspects is intimidating. But there's one journalist who's combed through almost all of it, the main San Francisco Chronicle reporter assigned to the Zodiac case.
Oh, you can go into Zodiac Arcania like many rabbits down many holes. I'm Kevin Fagan. I'm a reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle. I have thousands of tips in a drawer over there. It's a series of file folders and books dating back to 1996, I believe it is, right around then, of theories and tips and proclamations from people who believe they've solved the Zodiac case. It's going to spill over. This may be the first. Yeah, this is one of the first ones. No, it's not the first. You could spend all your days sorting this stuff. This one, this guy's sure it's someone in, I think, Scotland. Maybe they're right. Who knows? But there are just so damn many of them. They're sorting out which one is the real one. That's for the cops. That's why a lot of people, when they call, I say, my standard response, which I truly believe, is, thank you. I'm glad you're sharing this. When the cops move on it, that's when it's the best time to report on this. Because if I wrote a story on every, and in the plausible ones, if I wrote a story on every plausible Zodiac tip that came in, it'd be a weekly column. This is just everyone that came in. It's just going on. I wrote about this one because 2009. My dad did it. Did Dad do it? Who knows? And then I started getting a ton of stuff from people who thought their dad's the Zodiac, their mom's maybe the Zodiac, the guy upstairs is the Zodiac. It's a bunch of cops. No, it's a guy in Scotland. Wait, no, it's a crazy guy who lives downstairs, and I'm writing this letter as he's down there right now. If you read the ciphers, I get letters, so many every year, and packets and handmade books from people who have gone through the ciphers and, oh my God, they've solved it. And it says, fill in the blanks. And people who've gone through the handwriting say, oh my God, it's my grandpa's handwriting, or it's the guy down the road's handwriting, or it's the serial killer in prison, it's his handwriting. And they're dead sure. And they get experts who confirm their theories. It goes back. My dad did it, 2009. No, my dad did it.
Fagan is talking about a phenomenon that we also noticed in our investigation. In recent years, several individuals have come forward to claim they have direct family ties to Zodiac. One of those individuals is Gary Stewart. In 2014, Stewart went public to suggest his biological father, a man named Earl Van Best Jr., was the Zodiac. His primary evidence was found in one of the Zodiac's unsolved cryptograms. Stewart claims his father's name could be found in the so-called 340 cipher. Remember, this was a later cryptogram sent to the San Francisco Chronicle on November 9th, 1969. Zodiac sent a follow-up 13-symbol cipher on April 20th, 1970. Unlike the first ciphers, these were never officially decrypted.
My father's name is in that cipher. He said, my name is, and then he put 13 symbols. Those 13 letters are EARLVANBESTJR.
That was Gary Stewart speaking on a talk show in 2014. He published a book on these findings and more. But not everyone was convinced.
Unsolved cryptograms, it's like the equivalent of a treasure map, trying to figure out, well, where is the treasure buried? Sometimes I go through a period where I'll spend a lot of hours on it, and other times I don't because I get burned out on trying it.
This is programmer and amateur cryptographer David Aranchak. We talked with him early in the season about the first ciphers. He's tried to solve the 340 cipher, but like everyone else, has had no success.
People have written endless books about their suspects and, their claims about solving the solution, and in some cases they're rewarded for it, financially. Their books are wildly popular even though they haven't really solved the codes. If they can convince enough people that they have, then they're able to make a decent buck from it. So that's the other strange aspect of this whole thing. And like the case of Gary Stewart, who claimed his biological father, I guess, was the Zodiac. He's got very flimsy evidence on that. And I looked at his code work in his book. He got a publication deal from Harper's. I mean, it's a big publishing house. It was a best-selling book for a while. It hit the New York Times bestseller list. And he was going around to all these news shows. They would bring him on and say, Zodiac case is solved. Here's the guy who solved it. A lot of people go into it and they don't bother to learn cryptography. They just have kind of a intuitive feel for what needs to be done. And that, I think, is what gets people stuck in these traps of, they got a name to pop out or they got a phrase to pop out, but they can't prove that it was intentional. There is a sort of intoxicating effect when you plug in what you think Zodiac might have said, and it happens to fit. So you come up with this long phrase, but invariably the message turns into gibberish for the rest of the message. It's easy to get caught up in that first feeling of, wow, it's working, it's fitting, this message is coming out. But that's just because the ciphertext gives you enough room to make an early mistake. And it looks right at the beginning, but then later on it just turns into nonsense. I often compare it to, seeing faces in clouds. Well, a lot of times you'll see something that seems to be there, but it's not really there. It's just making your brain think that there's a pattern there, but it's actually happening because of just random chance. And that's a frequent mistake that people make when they look at the ciphers. So that's the kind of trap that they're in. They're kind of stuck in this place where they can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the message is real. Somebody will go through a procedure that generates a name, and so that'll be their solution. But if you repeat the process, you can make the same process generate other names, but they ignore that. Some of them are just so fixated on their suspect that they get locked into a particular way of solving it. What it's resulted in is, a lot of people are so severely misinformed on the case. They think that it's already been solved.
I stopped playing that game a long time ago. Where people, they make it sound like if you can show them that piece of information, it'll be really compelling. And then you go to the trouble to upload it, and they say, "Oh, big deal, doesn't prove anything." I didn't say it did. Jackwad. That's why I have the delete feature. I can ban people at will. But I've mellowed out a lot.
This is Tom Voigt of ZodiacKiller.com. As you heard last episode, he started the Zodiac Anniversary meetups. In many ways, he's a key figure in this zodiologist community. Tom has explored the 340 cipher extensively. He echoed David Aranchak's sentiment that the unsolved cipher theories are bogus.
People are so influenced by the fact that 3 of those codes didn't get solved. Well, they're just rubbish. There's no solution to be had. It's just to manipulate people and get them to keep focusing on that instead of on... The government does that. You throw out something, a press release about a controversial topic to get people not to talk about, what they should be talking about. It's fake news. Zodiac invented it. Zodiac invented fake news. With the code has my name in it and all this other stuff. Every letter was fake news. And it was to manipulate the people or the police into following the wrong path.
Even still, Tom Voigt developed his own suspect through the ciphers. Many years ago, he received a tip from an informant named Goldcatcher. This informant also spoke with the police, but at the time, they didn't consider him a reliable source. Tom, however, was so convinced by this new info, he began his own investigation. Eventually, Tom found the name of this new suspect in the initial 3-part cipher. These were the 3 letters sent to separate newspapers in July of 1969. The name Tom found was Richard Gaikowski.
At the time that the Zodiac sent his 3-part cipher, Richard was working for a counterculture newspaper, and he would publish articles, and he would call himself Dick Geik, so he would shorten his last name to the first syllable. And he spelled it different ways. Now, I have found evidence, actual proof, that where he spelled it G-A-I-K, G-I-K-E, and G-U-I-K. There's only one other spelling to get that Geik sound, and that's G-Y-K-E, and that was found in the cipher. Before it's translated, you can see it with your own eyes, G-Y-K-E. And Zodiac chose that G-Y-K-E was going to go right there, and he chose that it would represent, when solved, the last 4 letters of the word because. I will not give you my name because. So in the word because, the last 4 letters, A-U-S-E, are what Geik translates to when the key is learned and you translate the cipher. So Geik, Aus, key.
The key syllable can be found if you consider the word key, as in the decryption key, as part of the solution. According to Tom, Zodiac changed his encoding method throughout the 3-part cipher to throw off cryptographers.
So Zodiac intentionally changed the coding method, and that allowed Geik to translate to Aus. If he hadn't changed the coding method, then Geik would have become something else. It wouldn't have been AUSE. So you have all three syllables of his last name, which is really interesting. And he went on to become one of the first computer coders in the Bay Area. He started his own online news group in his 50s, which is when most people are long done learning something new. So he obviously had an aptitude for that.
For many online sleuths, Richard Gaikowski is another major suspect in the Zodiac case. But aside from the cipher connection, which Tom just mentioned, what other evidence is out there? Gaikowski was part of a counterculture commune in San Francisco called Good Times. There, he edited an anti-police, pro-violence newspaper. By January of 1969, the Good Times newspaper was publishing violent works of fiction. Many were extremely similar to the Zodiac's future crimes. There's some circumstantial evidence linking Richard Gaikowski to the Paul Stine murder. Richard's cousin lived on Washington Street, which you may remember is where Paul Stine was murdered. And that cousin's birthday was October 11th, the same day Paul Stine was killed. For this reason, it's possible he was in the area that day. Also, the Good Times Communication Center was located just a few houses down from Paul Stine's residence in San Francisco, and according to Paul Stine's sister, Gaikowski attended Paul's funeral. The most significant evidence came from the informant Goldcatcher. He was a former co-worker of Gaikowski's. According to Goldcatcher, Gaikowski would invite him to engage in violent acts similar to the Zodiac crimes. This was convincing enough that Napa detective Ken Narlow decided to interview and investigate Gaikowski. Goldcatcher also obtained an audio clip of Gaikowski talking. We received a copy of this audio courtesy of Tom Voigt from ZodiacKiller.com.
The whole thing about a code, you got to remember also, once until a code is broken, you have never any way of knowing whether it's a real code or whether it's just a fake code. So it just means that sometimes, like the military and all of that, sometimes you would send garbled messages that meant absolutely nothing, so that you get the enemy to spend all their time trying to break the code.
Nancy Slover, who spoke with the Zodiac when he called to report the Blue Rock Springs murder, listened to this clip of Richard Gaikowski. According to Nancy, it was the voice of the Zodiac. But aside from some initial questioning by authorities, Gaikowski was never thoroughly investigated. He died in 2004. Tom Voigt, Mark Hewitt, and other online sleuths have been meeting up for years. On occasions like these, they come together to tell stories and share theories.
I got a little group together, people that were very interested in the case. They come to my house, we have dinner, and we sit and chat and watch Zodiac movies over and over and over again. And so that's how this got going, and we go to all the Zodiac sites for every anniversary.
This is Sandy Betts. She's been a part of the Zodiac story from the very beginning. Sandy told us that back in the 60s, she knew some of the victims. She even claims to have had run-ins with the Zodiac himself.
It has taken up a good portion of my life. It really, really, truly has. My children have grown up with it, knowing that I was being stalked by somebody who was claiming to be the Zodiac, and my children were afraid. I had a daughter who was scared to death of him because he followed her as much as he did me. She finally passed away, poor thing. It sounds terrible, but when she passed away, I didn't have to worry about her being tortured by him because I was scared to death that he was going to get her and torture her.
According to Sandy, the Zodiac was obsessed with her and her daughter. She spent years confronting this man. He would supposedly show up at her home or tailgate her car late at night. Sandy saw his face many times, but never got his name.
I did a stakeout. There was several girls that were murdered in Pittsburgh area. And I decided to do a stakeout because I was told the guy was an older guy and that he looked like my guy. So I went and I backed in to a laundromat area where it was across the street from Taco Bell where most of the prostitutes hung out. And as I'm handing out the pictures and I'm talking, this one girl walks up and she screams, "Oh my God, that's the killer." I go, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, calm down, calm down. What do you mean that's the killer?" And she said he grabbed her jacket with one hand and he grabbed her hair with the other and he pulled a big hunk of her hair out and she slipped her arms like this and slipped out of the jacket. It's not too long after that, I get an envelope in the mail, and one of the pictures is returned to me. No return address. The stamp was upside down. It was a love stamp, I think. I figured he's telling me that he got a hold of one of the girls that I gave the picture to, and he wanted me to know that he killed another one.
Sandy told us many stories which connect her stalker to the Zodiac. One of those stories begins just days after the attack at Lake Berryessa.
September 27th, when the Zodiac stabbed Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell, within a day or two, this is before it hit the newspaper, within a day or two, the costume was put in my car, the killing costume. Now, this is 4 weeks before Halloween, so I thought it was a Halloween costume. But I made a copy of what it looked like, and it was in two parts. The top part was made out of a paper sack. It was painted black. I don't remember if there was a hole for the nose or a hole for the mouth, but at the very bottom, he had sliced each corner and bent it so that it sat on his shoulders. and the other part, which I call the poncho part, went over that and held it down. And the glasses that he had, the clip-ons, actually held the hood in place so that he could turn his head like this, and it would stay in place because of the glasses holding it together.
Sandy's theory is really confusing and complex, but it doesn't matter because we get along, we treat each other well, we're nice to each other. So.
We were curious what Tom thought of all these different zodiac theories. Each of the zodiologists has their own personal story, but still, they gather every year to spend time together, and the differences of opinion don't seem to matter.
As long as people are, nice and polite and, and not rude, then I don't really care what their theory is. We'll get along just fine. I have a bad reputation of being an asshole and kicking people off my message board and stuff like that, but really, I think I'm pretty fair. If you're going to be arrogant and aloof and confrontational and condescending, then I'll probably be a dick.
Usually, Tom and the zodiologists travel to the actual sites of the known murders, but something happened this year that changed everything.
Well, this year, Tom had a bus, but what was supposed to happen was we were all going to be on a bus and do a tour of the crime scene and probably go to where Betty Lou lived and where David lived and things like that. And everybody was very excited about doing this because it's the 50th anniversary. So Tom was having a big deal, a bus and everything. And this guy, who's not mentally stable, made a threat to Tom, and Tom reported it to Solano County Sheriff's Department, and I guess they probably said, it's not a good idea for you to have this bus tour because this sounds pretty serious.
Not much is known about the person who made this threat. Tom says he has a history of stalking these Zodiac gatherings. This individual apparently believes his own father is the Zodiac, and that the Zodiologist community is trying to kill him. Tom's fiancée, Angie, told us that this case has a detrimental effect on some people.
I think they just get so wrapped up in it that they start to lose sense of reality. It's easy to lose yourself in a movie or something, but that's not what this is. And I think a lot of those people kind of have that mindset, like things can play out the way they want them to if it's their movie and their script. And that's not good. Luckily, I don't see too much of that. Tom probably sees more of it than I do, but I kind of turn an ignorant eye to that.
Angie says this individual is one of those people. After he made the threat, local law enforcement advised everyone to stay away from Lake Herman. So Tom Voigt canceled the bus tour.
My boyfriend came all the way from Kentucky to go on the bus tour. And a lot of people, have hotels booked and things like that. And this screwed up everything, especially for poor Tom, who got it all together. Yeah, so it's a crying shame. But now they think the guy was just rambling, which makes me think that possibly they talked to him and he kind of backed off a little bit and said, I'm really not going to do that. I just wanted to scare him, and so we're probably going to end up going out there anyway.
Next time on Monster, the Zodiac Killer.
I know there were threats made for people who came here tonight.
We're here because of the 50th anniversary of the Zodiac killing. And we're just here for extra patrol and just kind of make sure everyone that comes here wants to be here and to stay safe.
I've had a couple of people tell me that they are positive that they encountered this person and escaped death.
And the headlights, there's a guy standing in the road. And then I remember I told the officer, I was saying, I think that was Zodiac from all that I've read and I saw and I've heard. It's like, I don't think he'll ever be caught.
We do need a face, and we need that face to be a monster. So that, I think, is why we have to identify the murder with a face.
In the area that was involved, basically East New York, Brooklyn at the time, it was like the murder capital of the world. It was the most violent precinct in New York City. And in the midst of all this violence was an emerging serial killer who was calling himself the Zodiac.
Monster, the Zodiac Killer, is a 15-episode podcast produced by iHeartRadio, How Stuff Works, and Tenderfoot TV. Donald Albright and I are executive producers on behalf of Tenderfoot TV, alongside producers Meredith Stedman, Mason Lindsay, and Christina Dana. Jason Hoke is executive producer on behalf of How Stuff Works, along with producers Trevor Young, Miranda Hawkins, Ben Kubrick, and Josh Thane. Scott Benjamin provides additional voice talent. Matt Frederick is our host. Original music is by Makeup and Vanity Set. If you haven't already, make sure to check out the first season of Monster, called Atlanta Monster, about the Atlanta child murders from the late 70s to the early 80s. Download the 10-episode season right now. Have questions or comments? Email us at monster@howstuffworks.com, or you can call us at 1-833-285-6667. Thanks for listening.